Hi everyone, and welcome to the Bear Necessities. I'm Bear, and today we are making apple empañadas. Mine are baked versus fried, and they have a little bit of leavening in the dough so that they're actually kind of soft and a little bit chewy instead of that nice pie crust that just breaks open because texture differences and preferences. And that's it. So let's get started. First, let's make our filling. In here, I already have 6 apples that were chopped up by my lovely husband. There are 2 Granny Smiths, 2 Ambrosia apples, and then 4 Gala apples. And then half of another Granny Smith is still over here. So one of those Granny Smiths, because I diced these up, and so did my husband. I started. And then I supervised, of course. And I wanted to just walk y'all through doing a little dice work. So we have this half apple, and this is a lot like when we had the pears. And so, peel, quarter, and then core the fruit. And then what we're going to do is we have these lovely wedge. It's about halfway through that, just cut down so you get 2 wedges, like 2 flat planes. And then from there, we're going to make not too thin, but thin enough cuts, maybe just 3 or 4 millimeters, less than a 1/4 inch, right around a 1/4 inch. And we're just going to do a fine dice and then put all of that over here, chef's treat, and just do all of your apples like that. The reason I'm doing 7 apples is I'm actually making quite a few of these. It is one of my beloved's birthdays today, and so I'm making apple pies, more or less. So let's just get these finished up with the dice. And it doesn't have to be the most beautiful dice you've ever done in your life. That's cool, because these are going on the inside of a baked pie. They're going to be soft and lovely and luxurious. And that's really what matters, is making sure the flavor's all there. There we go. Now, in this pan, I also have a tablespoon of butter. You can use whatever fat you want, or if you have really good non-stick and so you want to just use no fat, you can add a little water to them, just to help steam them along and get them soft. The reason I added butter or a fat is because I want them to kind of brown a little bit for me here, and almost crisp, but not quite. It's going to be really hard to do. And into this, before we even get started, let's go ahead and turn our heat on our handy dandy cooktop. Just gonna pull this toward me. All right, and so we're going to add spices. I have 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, and this is just regular everyday cinnamon, so don't worry about that. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I have a teaspoon of ground ginger. I have 2 teaspoons of ground grains of paradise. This is an optional one. I know they're very expensive and they're hard to find sometimes. For me, they just add a nice peppery, lemony flavor. You can just add lemon. You're gonna win with that. Or lemon zest, even better. And then there's also, I believe, just a pinch of cayenne because, let's have some fun with the heat. And 1/2 teaspoon of ground cardamom, another optional. And finally, we're going to add some grated nutmeg. So, got my microplane here, and I'm going to do about a teaspoon. It's going to be a solid amount of nutmeg. I really prefer the flavor. I use it in a lot of things, like my Alfredo sauce, things like that, because it plays off them so well. All right. So about a teaspoon of nutmeg in there as well. Finally, I'm adding 1/8 of a cup, or 2 tablespoons of just granulated sugar. Yes, these apples are sweet, but the sugar helps them caramelize. And we do want a nice caramelly filling for these. So that's what we're doing with that. So we're going to give this a nice stir. Everything's already starting to sizzle. Thank you, induction cooking. And I have my cooktop on half heat. So if you're using gas, right around a 4 to a 5 if you have a 10 scale. Otherwise, just medium to medium low, because you want these to cook a little bit lower, because you're going to need them to cook a little bit longer. So we want them very tender. If you like some bite to yours, then don't cook them as long, of course, because they still will be baked for about 12 to 15 minutes. So they're still going to have a little bit more cook time, but by then they will have cooled. So it won't be so much. All right, I have my apples coated with all the amazing spicy goodness, and let me tell you, it smells like fall went off in my house, which is nice because outside it's still, 33 degrees. So that's Celsius, y'all. It ain't fun. It's in the 90s. So what we're gonna do, grab the lid, put that on top. We're gonna drop the heat down to about low, just a slight bit above low. And we're gonna let this go. Stir it every couple of minutes just to check, make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom. This is enameled cast iron, so things can stick. So I'll be checking them fairly often. And we're gonna let them go until they are tender. And I will see y'all back when these are done. All right, everyone, so I'm back. I have let the apples cook. I let them go a little bit longer than planned, and they actually turned out a little bit better. So they went for a full hour, and so they got nice and caramelly. And then toward the end, I noticed that there was still a lot of juice from them, just because I had the lid on, and these were really good, juicy, sweet apples. So I took some butter and flour, about 2 teaspoons of each, and I mixed them together into a paste. And I put that in there and then stirred it in to thicken it. That kind of works a little bit like a cornstarch slurry, where you add cornstarch and water and blend that in. This, because of the butter, it allows you to mix the flour in without getting clumping. And so you get a much more rich flavor because of the butter, and you get a nicer texture because of the flour. It's less gelatinous and more just a creamy flavor. So that's what we're working with on here. And I've been letting them sit and cool for a little while. They still have a little bit more to go on cooling, probably, another half hour or so. It's already been about an hour that they're cooling, so they'll be fine. So now we're going to start the dough for the empañadas. Now, these are a yeasted dough, which is not the most traditional. It is for me. It's one that I know and grew up with. And there's a reason then why it's empañada instead of empanada. Because again, empañada is more like it's something surrounded by a cloud versus empanada, which is something that's inside of a bread. So like that pan in the middle is what tells you what it is. So the empañada is a yeasted, or it usually, well, also if you want to do them quickly, only have baking soda in them or baking powder. And so they turn out softer and lighter and fluffier. Whereas the empanadas are usually a lot crispier, just like a pie crust, especially if you fry them. These can be fried and they'll turn out amazing. It'll be like a nice little donut almost. So fluffy on the inside, crispy on the outside. But again, we're baking these. One, because of my own health, even though I won't be able to eat, too much of this. But also just because I've never enjoyed fried empanadas. Like, it's not a thing for me. I've always liked the baked ones. I don't know why. They're more tender. I don't know. Fight about it in the comments. I'll enjoy that. So in here, in lovely Loretta, in her bowl, I have 1 1/4 cup of warm water and 1 1/4 cup of warm milk. And then 2 teaspoons of instant yeast. and then about 2 teaspoons of sugar. And I just stirred it all together. And I've let it bloom. It is nice and frothy and fluffy and happy. And it's gone for about, I'd say about 10 minutes to get to a really good place. We want that yeast to be really, really excited about what's about to happen to it because it's gonna have to work. With that, we have half a cup of oil. You can also just use butter. I would suggest melted butter just because it mixes in a little bit better, but you know, whatever. If you want to use lard, go right ahead. That's also something far more traditional, and it gives a really great flavor to these. A lot of recipes, especially for the sweet ones, don't really call for vanilla, but I'm gonna go ahead and add some vanilla bean paste because y'all know me, I really enjoy vanilla. So I'm gonna be putting a teaspoon of this in here just to give it that nice little hint of vanilla because I'm going for apple pie, not traditional apple empanadas. And then in here I have a full teaspoon of salt. And then I have a 1/4 cup of sugar, not too terribly much, but enough to give it a nice sweetness and also to help them brown a little bit. And finally, in the bowl, I have 6½ cups of flour. Yes, 6½. This is 4½ cups of regular all-purpose flour and then 2 cups of whole wheat because y'all know me, gotta add some whole wheat to things. I like the texture it adds. It gives a nice chewiness to it and a really great flavor because the wheat itself is so light and sweet and lovely. And what we'll be doing is mixing this in slowly. So just a little bit at a time. I have my little 1/3 cup. Doesn't matter what you use. You're just adding a little bit at a time until it's all mixed together because if you just kind of dump it into 3, you might end up wearing some of it. We're trying to stay as clean as possible. All right, I have to grab my little hook here because I forgot to grab my hook. There we are. And we're gonna go ahead and get Loretta started on low just to begin. We're going to go ahead and add our 1/2 cup of oil. This is avocado oil. You can use whatever. Olive oil is really good in this because, especially if you have like a really good fruity, heady olive oil, it adds an amazing flavor to these. I'm gonna go ahead and add my 1/4 cup of sugar. Just everybody into the pool. I'm going to add our salt. And I have to correct myself, it's 2 teaspoons of salt, not 1. Sorry, mea culpa. And then we're going to add our teaspoon of vanilla, or vanilla bean paste in my case. I'm just eyeing it because it doesn't have to be super precise. So now I'm going to start adding flour, just a little bit at a time, like I said. Probably going to get a good cup in there just to start. And a lot of times you'll have your flour in here first and you'll add your wet ingredients in. I don't really want to deal with the sticking, so we're doing it backwards. So I've got a cup in, and I'm just going to keep adding. So I'm going to fast forward to the end of me adding this, and we'll continue. I'll be right back. All right, so I have all the flour in. It's mostly mixed. It's all kind of wet. It's going to have to go for 8 to 10 minutes. If you are kneading this by hand, you're going to need to do that about 10 to 15 minutes. It really, really needs to be worked. You need a lot of the gluten built up in this because you need a super stretchy, lovely, luscious dough. So I'm going to let this go on a 2, which is probably the highest you should ever do kneading on, just because you don't want to overwork the engine and you don't want to rip the gluten. You want to build it up nice and slowly. So I'm going to let this go for another 8 to 10 minutes, probably closer to 10 just to be on the safe side, and I will be right back. Well, okie dokie. It has been exactly 10 minutes, and this dough is so lovely and springy and soft. The way you know it's pretty well kneaded is when you push down in it and give it a nice firm push, it raises back up against it. It fights you a little bit. It doesn't keep the indentation. Then you know you are set. Like if you push it really hard, of course it'll keep, but it's gonna rise back. So let's go ahead and get this out of Loretta. All right, and we're gonna get this off the hook. It's okay if you waste a little, but And this makes a lot of dough. So you may not be planning on making an enormous amount of empanadas like I am, but I'm making a whole bunch of them. This makes about 45-ish. The recipe that I gave you cuts in half pretty easily. So just do that and you'll make 2 dozen. We're going to just let this sit. It is a yeasted dough, so it needs to sit. And we're gonna let this sit for just 30 minutes, no matter what, 30 minutes. It doesn't need to have a huge amount of rise, but it does need to rest for a while because we have worked it a lot in the last 10 minutes. So I'm gonna let this rest for half an hour. And when we come back, we're going to cut it into pieces, shape it, prep it, and get them in the oven. I'll see y'all back in a little bit. All right, everyone, so the dough has set for 32-ish minutes because I had to get everything set up. And it is fluffy and happy. Oh my gosh, and it smells amazing. First, what we need to do is measure out all of our pieces. So we're just going to break this up into 44-gram pieces, which you will notice it's not very much. These are not going to be absolutely huge either. And we're going to go ahead and just roll them up into a ball. Just for, you know, rising sake, because they are going to rise a little bit more while you get this done. And I'm going to go ahead and measure all of them out, get them rolled, and I will be right back. So while I'm rolling it out, let me just point out something here. Is because we went ahead and enriched the dough with a bit of oil, and because the gluten has worked in it so well, it's not sticking, which is fantastic. And what we're needing to do is get this out to about a 5-inch circle. And so I'm going to keep working on it. And that's decent. So now, take your filling. You can be slightly generous with it, but remember you have to close these up and you don't want them to explode in the oven. So then meet the two sides, kind of pinch it closed just a little, and press out any excess air that might be trapped. That is not helpful in the oven either, because then it'll explode. And then you're just going to start at one corner and start folding it over and pinching. So if you see, it's making a twist. And that's what you're going for, is you're twisting the end, pulling it, turning it over, and pinching. And that's just to go ahead and seal up the edge as well as we can. And there we go. They may not be perfect, but they're going to be tasty. And that is what matters here. And in the meantime, let's go ahead and get our ovens preheated. And this will be at 350 degrees. All right, so we are down to last steps. So I have some egg in here that was just whisked up and a brush, and we're going to egg wash all the empanadas, or empañadas, depending. Again, these are empañadas because they are going to puff up like the devil. And we're going to get them all nice and glossy. And then we're going to add a little bit of something extra. But first, let's get them brushed. Okay, so thankfully I had the help of my family. My husband and my partner came over and rolled these out with me, because if you look, some of them have already gotten a little puffy. So remember, these are an active yeasted dough, so they're going to get a little bit more puffy. Plus, it's kind of warm and a little humid in my house because we're in Central Texas, where we are in third summer after a false fall last week. So let me tell you, that was delightful. So now I'm just taking some granulated sugar and sprinkling it over the top. It's nothing fancy, but it adds a nice crunch, and it helps with the gloss a little bit. And we'll just get that sprinkled on all of them. Doesn't have to be much. But there's no doubt these are not the healthiest thing for you. I mean, if you want to tell yourself, it is a, you know, it's fruit. Whole grain. All right, so they have some sprinkles of sugar, and there we go. If you wanted, you could also add just a little bit of cinnamon or whatever onto the tops and make them your own. If you want to keep some of the dough and cut out little pieces of other things to make them pretty, have at it. These are your empanadas. Enjoy them. Have fun with them. But we're going to go ahead and get the first two popped into the oven and get them going. They're going to bake between 13 and 15 minutes. They should be a little bit soft, but kind of set, and you'll be able to tell when they are done, I promise. And I'm going to go ahead and get all of them baked off, and I'll meet you back once they're done. Okie dokie. So we have finished baking. A lot of them are behind me now because they are still cooling, but these have sat for a little while and are nice and cool. And as you see, they have browned lovely, and they have a soft crispness to them, but they're really smooth and they give, but then they have a little bit of a chew from a good yeasted bread. As always, I hope you enjoy making this recipe as much as I do. This was my first time making yeasted ones, and let me tell you, I'm probably going to be doing this a lot more because it turned out so well. And I'll be using this dough for some other recipes too. It's going to have to be used for other things because it just works so well and so quickly. Until I see y'all next time, bye.